Up to you.
Hi everybody. Thanks again for tuning in today. Yesterday we looked at design options, and the setup of all the System Center tools is the easiest part of it. To be honest, you need nothing to, the setup is just next. It's understanding the design and understanding what options you might pick, and how you would work from there. We assume we've got Config Manager up and going. It's a fairly easy thing to get up and going, especially if you watch yesterday's video. And right now that I have it up and going, you can see that I have a number of users. So, 3 users, and then I have a number of computers. In all systems, I've got 13 computers. Okay. So I get that by going to a discovery, and in my environment, I've basically just got 3 discoveries enabled. The discoveries that you can see for me are Active Directory User, Active Directory System, and a Heartbeat discovery. Now, my top tip is do not enable discoveries throughout the whole organization to begin with. Just do small discoveries. Base it on an OU, based it on, small increments, and work up and work up. There is one great thing. What has just happened there? There is one great thing, which is if I go to my Active Directory System discovery, we get options, and on the options we get only discover computers that have logged on in the last number of days, and and where the password has changed in the last number of days. The greatest pain with Config Manager is to go and discover a whole load of stuff that is dead, or it turns out Active Directory hasn't been clean, or that. I would dial that right down to 30 days. If you haven't come in the last month, I wouldn't be discovering you at all. So what that has meant for me is that I now have users and I now have computers. And I'm able to go and, my big thing is, how do I deploy applications? How do I deploy software updates? How do I deploy antivirus updates to that environment? So inside the software library, we have we have an application management. We have software updates. So within software updates, your Config Manager hierarchy will just have synced with your WSUS environment. It will pull down your list of updates, and there they are, and you get to deploy them. The method of deploying software updates or antivirus updates or packages is basically a same model or the same process. And the model is basically that you import, or you bring your item into the console, and all you're doing here is you're bringing it into the SCCM environment, into the database, the metadata, and then you would send it to a distribution point, and then you advertise it, and then people get it. So if I just say create an application, as packages, apps, and I just navigate to where I have a package, and I can bring it in. It asks me, who's the manufacturer, what do I want to do with it, and basically what I've then just done is I have brought the package into my environment, but it's not on a distribution point anywhere. And as long as it's not on a distribution point anywhere, you can't get it. You don't have access to it. So I just imported my Java, you can see down here that it's gray. And what the gray means is, have I actually sent it to a distribution point? In SCCM 2007, we had to go all around the shop to try and find if something was distributed. So right now, I can just pick the content. I can just say distribute content. I just would say, will you send it to a distribution point? I'm going to send it to SCCM2. And when I send it to my distribution point, it, has basically, the process has taken place. If I refresh this, it instantly should go, this mustardy yellow, which basically tells me that it's in progress, meaning that Config Manager is going to send this object to the application catalog. And because this is all in one box, if I refresh again, there it is green and life is good. Okay, so right now I have this application and it's ready to go. I'm ready to deploy this and send it out. So in Config Manager 2007, we had the idea of a package. So a package is basically just an exe, anything that's not an MSI, anything that doesn't have, intelligent information built into it. And Config Manager treats packages in 2012 the same way it did in 2007. They're a very basic, very single-purpose object, whereas an application is a completely different thing. The reason why an application is completely different is because Config Manager now uses an application catalog. And what an application catalog is we no longer keep the old package share environment that we used to have. So you see here I have SMS, PKG, C dollar, and there's nothing in it. But this is a machine that I send that package to, and I have other packages too. And the reason for that is because everything by default goes into the content library. And what a content library is it's a series of files that have been encrypted, they've been hashed and put into the library. And then the content library implements single instance storage, which is something that has been requested in Config Manager for about 8 years. So any file that's shared will only go in once, and it cuts down on file size, especially when you're doing operating system deployment, by about 90%. Yeah, so when I put in multiple WIMs and they're sharing the same architecture, they just get put into the content library. So if I take an application now like Java and I go into my deployment types, you can see the MSI installer as it's just it's part of what it is. But within the MSI installer, so you get some very nice things inside it. You get things like the detection method, how do I know that you're there? And you get things like a requirement. So into a requirement of an application, I can add device requirements like Active Directory site, CPU speed, your base, etc. But if it's just going to be for a user, under user, I can say that this is the user's primary device. Okay, that this is a device that the user uses all the time. So I'm sure many of you who've been around and are getting grey like me remember using when Active Directory first came out. When we moved to Active Directory 2000, and we had the ability to deploy an application to a user, and we thought, oh, this is awesome. When a user logs on, we will give them something and they can do their work. Okay. But then, we all discovered that, including ourselves, we just log on to a machine for 25 minutes or an hour or 6 hours, and you don't want Project and Visio and CAD and stuff appearing on your machine. So, but there's a desire and a need to say, if this is somebody's primary device or devices, well, will you please give them this application? Okay, so in Config Manager 2012, we're able to look at this thing called user device affinity. So under administration, under your client settings, in your client settings, you get this tab for user device affinity. So what user device affinity allows you to determine how much does a user have to use something for the device to be considered their primary device. Now, I've dialed this right down for demo purposes, but what I'm saying in that slide is, if a user uses a device for 60 minutes in a day, make that their primary device. Now, you would probably change this to 8 hours in a day, or 8 hours over 2 days. And then you can also see under user settings that we're allowing users to define and determine their own primary device. So what this means is, if I sit down on a PC and I use it, and the device becomes usage defined as one of my primary devices, well, you can then say, I want a user to get a piece of software, but only if the piece of software is going to a user's primary device. If it's not your primary device, don't give the user that piece of software. Now, just quickly to explain, there are 2 settings that are needed for that to work. And the 2 settings are, inside group policy, you have to be enabling account logon and logon events, because that's what Config Manager uses to read this data. Okay, and then if I just go back to assets and compliance, and I go to HV1, which is the Hyper-V host that I'm working on right now, and I say primary user, it will open up the person who has been working on this machine the most, which is me. Okay, and if I go back to users and I go to the administrator, which is me, and I say primary device, okay, 2 devices, because the device that I'm working on quite a lot is HV1 and SCCM2. Now, what that would mean is that if I put a requirement on an MSI to deploy an application, that if it's my primary device, I'll be allowed in. So if I just go to my device collection right now, and I just go to all systems, and in all systems, I just have a look at, so there's SQL and SQL 1, and they both have clients and stuff is working on them right now. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go to the software library. I'm going to, first of all, look at Adobe Reader, and you can see here that I have a deployment for Adobe Reader. A deployment is what we used to call an advertisement. You don't see advertisements anymore, they're called deployments. So you can see here I have a deployment to the all users collection. So if I just get in and look at the properties of that, you can see here that it's an available installation to all users, and they can run it any time they want. Okay, so here's the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to Java. I'm going to say deploy collection. So I'm going to put this first of all to device collection, and I'm going to put it to all systems. In all systems, you can see it's picked the distribution point already. The distribution settings, I'm just going to make...
Yeah. We've lost your video.
Lost video, okay. Share main monitor.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks for telling me.
It's okay.
Okay, and you can see, I can make it available. So if I make it available to a computer, well, how does a computer go and collect it? And we'll have a look at that at the moment. So it's telling you how it's going to find it. It's going to show it to you in Software Center. and I hit finish. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Java. I'm going to hit deploy again, because you can have multiple deployments for one object. And this time I'm going to deploy it to my users. Now, the application model has changed in Config Manager, because there's now lots more ways for you to deploy applications, for users to get the applications, and for you to control that whole process. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do for this for users. I'm going to say you can install it. I'm going to make it available, but I'm going to require admin approval before you're allowed to get this. Obviously, you're not going to be requiring admin approval for Java, but for something that you have to pay per license, you might do just exactly that. Okay, so let's just have a look at what's going to be happening now. You know, it's a Java update. I've just made it available to all systems. There's no change since 2007 in that if I want to make that appear, I still have to do a machine policy retrieval and evaluation, or just wait until my machine pulls policy, which would be an hour. Now, just had some of these open, so let me just close them, and so let me just show you a couple of things that you'll see now. Is when you go to the start bar, all programs, and you go to Microsoft System Center, and Config Manager has been installed, you get this new thing called Software Center. And what Software Center is, it's basically like Config Manager's add remove programs. Okay, and what Software Center does is it allows you to see software that's available to you. So you know, Java I made available as an application. Okay, and then another thing that I can do is I can go and search the application catalog, because Software Center is just for your computer. It has nothing to do with your user. Okay, and if I go to the application catalog, I can see applications that have been published for a user. And you can see here Java requires admin approval. Okay, so if I go to Java now, instead of being installed, it just says request. If I went to Adobe Reader and I said install, I already have Adobe Reader on this machine, I think. Okay, so then what will happen is it's evaluating the requirements on this machine, and you can see the application's already installed, which is something that we looked at earlier, which is the you know, the text methods that Config Manager is able to use. If I go to Java and I hit request and I said, please, Dave, can I have it? And I hit submit. Now what's going to happen is for me to get this application, there's going to be an approval sent through to Config Manager. And here's my approval already. And if I hit approve, I say, sure, sure, you can Paul. So here is Dave being the, you know, and you can see the you know, here was the request. Please, Dave, can I have it? And here's the approval. Sure, Paul, you can. Now, what that means is, if I go back to Software Center and I just go to my application requests, you can now see that it has been approved. So if I go back to the application catalog, it says requires admin approval, no, and I just hit install, and you say off you go. Okay. Now, here is so that was it. You know, me going and putting a request for that to happen, and you can see just my software is downloading and preparing to install, and life is good. Now, you know, so that's an application approval inside Config Manager. Awesome, isn't it? Just on a side note, if you say, well, you know, I don't want application approvals going into Config Manager. I'd rather have them in my, you know, my help desk, whatever it is. Well, with inside Config Manager and software update, Java has been successfully installed on this computer. Awesome. So Microsoft have written a solution accelerator to take this process here, and using Orchestrator and Service Manager, it goes into Service Manager. So what then happens in Service Manager, because Service Manager is a much more intelligent place for this to be, and what will then happen inside Service Manager is, for example, an email will be sent to your line manager and to purchasing manager. And the two of them will say, you know, Dave Nordy's looking for Google Chrome or whatever, you know, someone's going to have to give approval to. And they will say yes. And then once they approve it, it will go back to Config Manager, boom, 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 boom. And it's a fully integrated, fully controlled process. So they've really thought long and hard about how an application, you know, the life cycle of it and how it needs to move through the organization. If I get on to SQL, so where is SQL? So if I get on to SQL,
lost your video again, Paul. Sorry.
Lost video again. Awesome. Main monitor. So you're not missing much. I'm finding one of my SQL servers. So here is one of my SQL servers. Okay, and onto this SQL server, I'd like to do something new now. And what I would like to do is, I would like to say, it would like to know, why did I shut it down in bad mood? Okay. Go away. So here's what I'd like to do with this system is I'd like to be able to go to the application catalog, right? And in the application catalog, I'd like to do something like I'd like to request Adobe Reader, but I would like Adobe Reader to be only available to me if this is my primary machine, and we know it's not. We know SQL isn't my primary machine. Okay, so here's all I'm going to do. Look, I'm going to go to my applications. I'm going to go to Adobe Reader, and then I'm going to go to my deployment types, and I'm going to go to my MSI content there. Okay. Now, here's what I'm going to do. Just what I was talking about a second ago. Do you remember I said, would you please go and install Adobe Reader on my machine? And it said, but it's already there. So we have these really nice detection methods inside an application whereby you can say, I want you to add, you know, go and check for something in the file system, go and check for something in the registry, or go at the Windows installer code, which you can only use if it's an MSI. You can still use the application model with exes, just have to, you obviously can't use a Windows installer code with them. So here is what and here's another awesome thing, is it's already built in the return codes. Config Manager will already tell you what your return codes are. So I could be asked to deploy an application to 15,000 machines. I can deploy it, and over the next 3 days I can run reports to say, show me if, you know, that everyone has it, or that people require a reboot, etc., etc. But here's what we're interested in now. We want to put in a requirement. And the requirement that we want to put in is that from a user perspective, not the device, from a user perspective, you can only have this if your primary device equals true. Okay, and if it's not your primary device, you ain't getting it. So here is what I'm, that will do. I hit apply. Now, and okay, so straight away. You know, I actually think it will. So if I go to SQL, okay, and I go to Adobe Reader, and I just say install.
Paul, while you're playing, you did your demo using Flash Player.
What's that?
You set those configuration settings on Adobe Flash Player, and you're
good man. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, I can quickly go into the reader. So I can put the Flash Player on as well, but okay. Deployment types, deployment edit. Thank you. I've been sitting here wondering why that ain't working. Equals true. Okay. Apply. Okay. Apply. I was wondering how it applied so quickly, and you know why it applied so quickly? It normally takes like an extra second or two, because if there's a deployment, it has to go and readjust those deployments. So, did that actually go through and do the install?
Look to know we lost your video again.
Okay. Share main monitor. Thank you.
You're just faffing around between monitors here. Okay.
So, if I hit install now, what I hope is that this will fail. And the reason why it should fail is because this machine is not my primary device. Okay, so it's bombed out. Now, one of the things that we saw in the device settings is allow a user to define if they use the device. Okay, now, how come I ain't got that? Okay, so here's what I'm gonna have to do to make it work, is I'm gonna have to pick SQL 2, and I'm gonna have to manually go in. If I gave it an hour of usage, you know, it would just kick in. So if I just go to SQL, primary users, and I just say edit primary user, and I say administrator. Okay, so here's what should happen now is, I don't know why I'm not allowed to click it there, but anyway, if I go to the control panel and I just go and I pull policy, you know, all that pull policing is going to do is it's going to go in and say, here, look, would you check that has applied? And so now what should happen is when I go to the application catalog and I pick Adobe Reader and I hit install, it should say, yeah, do you know what? Okay, I'll let you have it. So I could be a little quick, but will we see? Will we chance it? So it's going to go in. Okay, it's going to take you know, a minute or two. I'll come back to it in 2 seconds, and hopefully it should be in. It should have done the job. Okay, so let's just go to prove it's not that. To prove that's exactly what it is. Let's just go to Flash Player. I will try and keep my MVP status by not deploying Google Chrome on a Microsoft yoke. All users. Okay, so next. Sorry, just to go back. Do you see the way something is available versus required? Well, this is the same back in the old days of available means you can have it if you want it. Required means when you log on, you're going to get it pretty soon. I wouldn't say instantaneously, but very soon. If you start to use user device inside your operating system deployment, and you're going to use user state migration tool, it can automatically see applications that have been assigned to you, and while it's doing the operating system deployment, it will then go and find applications that have been applied to you that were required, and it will go and deploy them to you, all fully automated. Let's just read that. So I should have Flash Player. Now, I actually haven't checked this. Has a Flash Player. I was just checking, is Flash Player in a distribution point, and it is. Okay, so if I just hit Flash Player and I hit install, so an application, oh, you don't have, wow, okay, so maybe that is actually something else. Let's just check
Lost your video again, Paul. I don't know what you're doing.
Okay, sorry, Dave.
Okay.
It's okay. I'll come back to it, guys, and I'll show it to you on tomorrow's session. So yeah, I'll come back to it and do it on tomorrow's session. So far, we've been looking at packages. We've been looking at everything to do with Software Center and applications. What if it's not an application? What if it's a package? If I could just show you one last thing here is, if I put in, for example, PDF and I hit enter, it automatically shows me Adobe Reader. Okay, so if you have, just say you're WinRAR, and you make WinRAR available on the application catalog, you would go and add some keywords so that when I go to Adobe Reader and I just go to properties of the reader and you just go to application catalog, you're able to then go and say, here are keywords, and you can see I put in PDF. So somebody who gets a file that they don't understand can just go to the application catalog. They can just hit, RAR or PDF, or if it's a checkpoint file, for your VPN, they can just key it in, and then they'll be able to see the checkpoint, MSI, and hopefully you'll have put in user documentation and user text, and so it becomes a really, super advanced and super enjoyable, system. Just say it's not an MSI, like it's an EXE. Do you have to just go back to plain old or packages and say import package and and that's it, and then it's not in the application catalog, and then you can't do all the cool stuff that I've shown you? Well, absolutely not. You can just say create application. I can just go /nas/sourc sources and specify a valid UNC path and a .net.exe. Okay, so it's 100% not an MSI file, and you can see that it's going, please, show me a valid Windows installer file. So then I just go and I say, look, I'm going to manually create it, and I just say, .NET framework for MS software version 4, and then for the application catalog, I can say it's .NET framework 4. I can say .NET 4. Next, deployment and I just go in, add, and I just say manually specify a deployment type. And name, and I just say .NET 4. I don't think you need to bother with languages. Content location, Control V, installation program. That should actually stop there. And then the program should be sources. It should be cancel, Control V, and then just get rid of that. Okay, and you can put in an uninstalled program for it. So how would you get, you know, an uninstalled program, or what would you, how could you find that out? You can just get the MSI and just do space / question mark, and get your uninstalled program. The detection method, you can go in and put in a detection method for how you're going to find it's there. You don't. I do actually need a detection method. DTCTR. Okay, so some of these it would help if you knew in advance, but I am just going to fire this one in. So what I'm looking for is the registry. What I'm looking for is high key local machine, and then the key that I'm looking for is high key local machine. Software, Microsoft, .NET Framework, .NET Framework 4, and if I can find that, if you can get me that, then I'm going to say it's fine. I'm going to say what's the install behavior, and I'm going to say install for system. Only when a user is logged on, absolutely not. Whether or not a user is logged on, I'd always want them hidden. That should only run for 20 minutes. Estimated installation time, I'm going to leave blank. Okay. Requirements right now, there are no requirements. Dependencies, there are no dependencies. Summary, it should just finish on a summary, and off I go. So all I have done is taken an exe, and from the exe I have brought it into the environment and put stuff on it. Now that is not just going to run programs. There's no way that's going to just run by itself, and so you would just need the install switches after it. Copy, and so my install switch are there, /q for quiet, no restart, and then chaining package admin. On my other screen, I've just gone setup.exe space / and question mark, so I find out what they are. So right now I have a detection method, go down into the registry and see if the .NET Framework 4 exists as a registry key. There's no requirements on it. Microsoft will already give you the return codes. I hit apply, I hit OK, I hit next. Okay. Right now, the .NET Framework as an application is just sitting in the environment. Okay. Once again, you can see it hasn't been sent anywhere, so it's not possible to deploy that right now. you would just have to say distribute content. Okay, and then from distribute content, once again, you're just picking your distribution points. Okay, I can pick both if I want. I hit next, next, and it's going to send them off. Now, instantly, that should go, yellow to say it's trying stuff. And a couple of them, the first one, which is this distribution point here, that's going to go green pretty quick. And then the second one will go green when content has been sent to it. Now, here's a really, super duper thing about 2012 is it has a simulate deployment mechanism. And what simulate deployment is it's an application pre-flight check. So if I pick Java, if I were to say device collections, if I to say all systems, and I hit next, applicate has already been deployed to the all systems collection. Okay, cancel, yep. So let's just go and put something into PK and fire it onto PK. So here's the collection we made yesterday. There's my all systems. One of the sweet things that we can now do is we can take a PC and you can just right click it and say add to an existing collection. So you don't have to, it used to be not so easy. I just did that on HV1, not so useful. Add to an existing collection, PK. Okay. So now, I now have a collection with objects in it. So if I were to pick Java now, I could simulate an install to PK. Okay. And what's going to happen is Config Manager is going to say, well, okay, that's installed to, the PK environment. What's going to happen? Does the content exist on the distribution points? Is there requirements, etc., etc., etc.? And so from that, we can then go and report on, is an application actually going to work? Is it going to go out? Is it going to install? What's going to happen from there? And then, important stuff from this is I can pick an application. I can say set a security scope that we looked at yesterday. I can remove default and just put it in Microsoft Ireland. What would that mean is that, if I had one primary site and you have multiple applications, some that are only server, some that are only client, I can go in and say, well, if you're part of the server security scope, you don't get to see those packages. I'm reinforcing again, showing how with a single site, single primary site, you can still set your security scopes and you can still configure who's allowed to get access to and see what. Inside the software library, so we've looked at applications. Packages are just plain old exes that you run that are, either they're very simple exes, so they just run like as a, an application, and there's nothing, to them. They're just going to run, or that you have to put a / switch in front of them, and you're going to have to say what the switch is. So that's one option. Or B is that you're going to deliver a package to someone's desktop, and they're going to fill in a couple of things and let the application run by itself. Okay. So earlier I said inside here, we've software updates, we've applications, and we've operating systems. So operating systems we're going to look at tomorrow. But in terms of software updates, if I could explain what I've done to get software updates to appear in here. On my CAS, which is my primary site, my top site, For you, it could be a CAS, or it could be just your primary site. I've gone and I've installed Windows Update. And then something that I always do is I make my primary site a member of the WSUS administrators group.
Lost your video again, Paul.
1 second. I make it part of my WSUS administrators group. Now I find when I do that, it means when I go and deploy the Windows Update role, it just comes in and connects straight away. So from administration, I went to sites, I went to site servers and roles. Sorry, okay, so here's a classic thing to see. Right now I'm on my primary site, so you don't see my CAS, okay? And if I were to go and connect to my CAS, you would see everything. And the reason you see everything is because the CAS is a central admin site. But then here's some important things to understand. Inside the application management, all of these applications have come up from the primary site. There's Java, and you can see it has been sent up from the primary site. So it's two-way replication. But if I go to my administration and I just go to my site roles, I can now see my CAS. I right-clicked, I just said add system role, and then the role that I added, which ain't there because it's in, is my software update point and my endpoint protection point, which is my antivirus. Now, installing your WSUS and your endpoint roles, they have to be done on a server that either has the WSUS client or the console, or actually has WSUS installed, one or the other. So you can see then, the endpoint protection role has almost no configuration. You just click that you accept it, you enable it, and when you do that, a very short time later, you end up with endpoint protection on your system, that thing there. And I've put in my software update point. On my software update point, the things that I've configured is use this machine as the active software update point. And I then go back to my software library, and I then go to my software updates. You can actually see that it has gone and brought down a whole bunch of software updates. If I go in and I say add a criteria, and I just say product, and I just say add. So on my product, and in here, if I just stick in Windows 7, and I just say search. So what it's then going to do is take all of those software updates and just bring it down to what I've asked for, which is only critical, etc., for that apply to Windows 7. And there they are. And then the next thing I do is I would filter by required. Now I put this on, a very short time ago. Can't imagine I'm going to have any required. And then I would take the ones that are required, and I would then go and download them. And when they're downloaded, they are just deployed the same as software is deployed. It's sent to a distribution point, the client connects to the distribution point, and it gets the object. In terms of your antivirus, your endpoint protection, you can see like there's two settings. Endpoint protection updates are deployed through Windows updates. Now this is a very important point. If you've missed 99% of this, listen to this point. WSUS and therefore endpoint protection only deploys through WSUS, through Config Manager. So what Config Manager does is it goes and sets local computer group policy. So it sets things like who your WSUS server should be, which is config manager, right? Now, if you have a group policy set on your domain that says everybody gets Windows updates from a WSUS server, then that will override config manager. And what will that mean? It will mean you can't get Windows updates and you can't get antivirus updates if you're using endpoint protection. So you've got to make sure when you're deploying this that there is no Windows update group policy, because it will override your local policy. There's an excellent tool, which as soon as I've said it, I forget who makes it. But there's SolarWinds. SolarWinds make an excellent tool on checking your WSUS settings. You know, you just put it on a machine, say run, and it runs, and it gives you a report on Windows Update and how you connect to Windows Update and what's happening. Okay. Right now, I'm on 50 minutes. Would anybody like to ask me anything? Any questions on what I've done so far?
And just for clarification, most of your microphones are muted, because I was muting them because we was getting a bit of feedback. So either unmute your mic and ask the question, or type it into the little iron box down the bottom left-hand corner.
So I'll keep going for the last few minutes. When I'm deploying software, and I want to see what's happened, nearly the first thing that I'm doing is I'm going to monitoring, I'm going to system status, I'm going to status message queries, and if you do nothing else other than just say show all status messages. Now, what all status messages is going to do is, it's a bit like heavy going, as in it's going to show you, everything. But I can see things, happening, like the administrator added a new distribution point to a package, PS0004. I can see things like administrator modified collection. They modified collection properties, etc., etc. Where did that go? Modify, etc., etc. So if you just use show system queries, it will tell you what's happening, very quickly and what's going again. Other than that, you now have one place to look at distribution status. So inside distribution status, you get a single folder for content locations. Okay, I'm just going to jump onto questions now. If you have existing endpoint protection, is it automatically uninstalled when enabling forefront endpoint? It's not. You'd have to do that. You have to go and manually do that yourself. And then for those who don't know this whole endpoint protection, I mean, most people right now have Microsoft Security Essentials sitting on their desktops at home, but endpoint protection is a slightly more worked on version of Antigen. It's a company Microsoft bought. If any of you were email administrators back in the day, Antigen was an awesome email product. And endpoint protection is a fairly seamless, fairly simple, fairly easy, one place location just to deal with your antivirus. Any other questions, type away. If you look in this area here, folks, you can see this. It looks real simple. It's awesome. It's things like Adobe Reader. It's been targeted to one. It's 100% compliant. And if I say, show me the status of the package, I can go into my status messages, I can find the object, and then I can see the distribution point that it's after going to. Okay, so can then drill in and say, oh, give it to me in SMS talk, and it's fine. Look, distribution manager has taken a package CAS0005 to distribution point CM2 on site PSS going to cmm2.systemcenter.local. So monitoring of packages and how they go out and how they get to the environment is has really changed. One point I mentioned earlier that I had enabled some discoveries stuff. You don't have to discoveries. You can just push the client out and the client will come in and populate your database. But I have created a boundary and a boundary group. So boundaries are no longer associated with sites. They're associated with subnets and IP ranges and Active Directory sites. So you don't. Do you remember for those of you who used 2007, we used to go to SMS. We used to go to your secondary site, and inside your secondary site, you'd go and configure your boundaries. So there's my site there. There's my second site there. And if I go to the properties of this site, you can see, there's the ports it's using, standard sender, it's publishing, but there's nowhere to configure its boundary. And we do that, we can create a boundary, and then a boundary group is a collection, is a join between a distribution point and a content location. Doesn't matter what site references that. So you can see, here's my reference. This server, this distribution point, is responding to clients that have an IP range from 1 to 100. My last sort of 3 minutes. If you do a Bing search for IP subnets are evil and not good, I think that's what the blog is. A lot of the config manager MVPs are saying do not use IP subnets, use IP ranges. With supernetting, with all the stuff that people can do right now with IP subnets, it isn't easy for config manager to know what subnet you're in. Or it's not as easy as we think, but I can tell you for sure it can work out if you're in an IP range. And as much as possible now, we try and use ranges. I try and use ranges, not subnets. Now, obviously, if your Active Directory is in great shape, well then you can go and use your AD sites. So Kieran, who is like a demon at finding stuff, has already got it there for you. And I wasn't bad. IP subnet boundaries are evil. There you go. And this is a really good blog explaining, why it's much better to use IP ranges. It does exactly what their name implies. IP subnets, not so easy. Folks, we've 2 minutes left. If I could take the 2 minutes to say, tomorrow we're going to look at capturing, deploying, etc., with an image. And the settings we might want to look at when doing something with an image. And then Thursday we're going to look at, how do we understand this environment? How do we look at things like our reporting and status messaging, and what's the flow? How does stuff move around this organization? By the end of that, it's all level 200. You should have a good chance, of getting out and deploying it. And as soon as we're finished sort of the 5 pillars of System Center, I'm going to come in and start doing, much deeper stuff on things like the application approval workflow. How does config manager and orchestrator and service manager, push something along the line to have a really smooth, really organized thing. I hope audio, etc., was better today. I know we lost video temporarily a couple of times. Dave will send you an email with where this recording is on YouTube. You can send it on to people that you like, and we appreciate any feedback, and we obviously appreciate you coming in on your lunch breaks. So there's your second hour of Config Manager. Thank you very much for your time.